It's 1906. A mysterious outbreak of typhoid fever is sweeping New York City. Every week more people fall ill, and despite thorough investigation, there's no cause in sight. Not that is, until Mr. George Soper and his 16-year-old assistant Prudence Galuski encounter an Irish cook who may be spreading disease.
December 7, 1906. Monday morning, Mr. Soper and I took the elevated train to 57th Street and marched our way over to 5th Avenue, up to the mansion where Mary Malone works. We rang the bell and said we were from the Department of Health and Sanitation. We know not to mention our real purpose until we speak to the head of the household. The very pleasant butler showed us to a dazzling parlor where he asked us to wait while he fetched his employer.
I'm so glad you're here.
I'm sorry, I must be clear, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm investigating this epidemic. My assistant and I were engaged to hunt down the source of a typhoid epidemic that probably began some years ago. Our findings have led us here. I believe you've hired a cook named Mary Malone. We have reason to think she has unwittingly brought the disease to you.
But my cook is not ill. She never has been.
I understand. We believe she doesn't need to be ill to carry the typhoid.
I've never heard of such a thing.
We only ask that she submit to testing at our offices.
But her employment bureau says the only sickness she's ever had was the common cold.
We must have the chance to test her. It's the only way to rule her out.
I think you're wasting your time, but if you say you can prevent the spread of the disease, fine.
He showed us to the kitchen and introduced us to a tall, flame-haired woman with a knife in her hand and a half-cut onion on the chopping block before her. This was Mary. I could not stop myself from staring at her. In my mind, I had pictured a Medusa, a pox-ridden hag with missing teeth and long, dirty fingernails crawling with worms. Yet standing before us was a woman who looked proper and stately, hair in a bun, apron neatly ironed, nails trim and pink. Mr. Soper started by telling her we were from the Department of Health and Sanitation of the City of New York, and she resumed chopping her onion. My kitchen is clean.
With all respect, Miss Malone, we have reason to believe you may be involved in the carriage of typhoid without your knowing it.
What do you mean I'm involved? I ain't been sick a day in my life.
Take a moment to think back over your work history.
I worked for a dozen lovely families. What about them?
The disease seems to follow you, doesn't it? Wouldn't you like to know why that is?
Well, I don't know.
I know why 'tis. The city's full of sickness. Everywhere you look, there's people dropping with the typhoid in the croup. Tain't no surprise, mister. People get sick all the time.
Yes, but the typhoid in particular seems to follow you, ma'am. If one is not careful, disease can enter the food one prepares, especially raw, uncooked food, like peach ice cream.
Mary is a cleanly person and a fine cook. Of course she washes. I wouldn't hire anyone who wasn't completely scrupulous in every way.
You're saying I ain't clean?
We could solve this issue if you'd simply come to my office and give a sample of your fluids.
My what?
Your fluids.
What in the world?
Your fluids, such as your blood, for example, will tell us if you carry disease.
You want blood?
Mary, please.
Your blood, yes!
I'll give you blood! Get out of here! Out! Out with your foul ideas!
Please, ma'am, it's very important that we test you.
Ow! She screeched and yanked the knife out of the block and started coming around. Mr. Soper turned on his heel, scooting me out of that house in front of him. And that was the last we spoke to her.
Original text of Deadly by Julie Chibbaro. Adapted for podcast. Excerpt read by Kelly Ellenwood, Peter Julian, and Hal J.